says we are live, but I cannot see us yet. So,
Takes a few minutes for
yeah.
things to happen.
So
So
in the meantime, we're like showing up and we're like not knowing. And let me just.
and
Oh, it's muted, so there we
it's so
go.
funny
We
to
are
like,
there.
did you find us?
I did find us.
Yeah. And it's so funny. Every month we do this. It's like a new thing. Like, how do I find us?
How do I
Yeah.
find us? Where are we?
Where
Yeah.
are we?
We're here.
Like a
Bruce
gold.
Russell and Deb Epstein. So welcome everyone. I'm going to see if I can put the chat up. So if people are, oh yeah, it's right there. So if you're here visiting, say hello. Hello. We were just, we often do this. We get together and we were like, what should we talk about today? And then we get into this deep conversation and it's like, oh wait, we have to go live. We have to share this. That's why we're here. So we were just having this really interesting conversation about death. And so I think we will continue that conversation. Maybe Deborah, you could just start with that expansive feeling that you were feeling. I think
Yeah.
that's a really important one.
Yeah. So I just want to share that and just to contextualize why we're talking about this. So we don't leave people guessing, is my dad passed away on May 4th. And it was a sudden sort of thing, but I say that at the same time as I sensed it was coming. And so the gift in that sensing it was coming allowed me to do some of the healing work I needed to do while he was still with us, to say things that I needed to say, to connect with him on levels that, I needed to connect with him on, to clear. And so when my mom had texted me and said, he was going into the hospital, and it's really funny because I could have sworn she texted me that he was passing. And when I read the text, it didn't say anything about that. Just, I'm bringing him to the hospital. And I just knew I needed to be there. So I was the one that added all of that in.
Because you knew already. Yeah.
Because I already knew. And it was so funny because my brother had called me like shortly after I got that text, and he asked me if I was going. He was going to go. So he actually talked to my mom and heard what was going on. So it was like kind of all through that I knew I needed to be there. And it was really, it was really cool. It was a beautiful experience because my dad was a very spiritual person, very, I wouldn't say religious. He just had a way of life that wasn't like my spirituality, but he did have something. And he was very strong in his faith. And I feel like because he had that, it made the passing, his passing, for all of us to be an experience of healing. Each one of us received some sort of gift as a result. And when I was there for about 10 or 12 days, before, during, and after, and when I came back to Sedona, I was telling Larissa that I was sitting on my deck, and it was nighttime, and I was looking out at the stars, and I just felt this huge expansiveness, like this oneness with everything in a way that I've never experienced it before. And I really realized that it's just, we're in this like sweet portal of my dad's passing, and that all of us as family members were in that experience. And I would, because of my awareness and because of my ability to kind of tap into that energy, it felt like such a huge gift. And actually there was an actual celebration sort of energy about it at the same time. Like, as a human being, I'm really sad that my dad's not here with us anymore. I could feel and sense through that expansiveness, like that there was a joy of that release. So that's, yeah. kind of where we were
well,
before
and
we hopped
interesting
on.
Too, because we don't often hear words like joy and celebration and things like that. around death, because we've been taught we must be sad, we must, but only for a certain amount of time, because there's all these rules around, all of, and absolutely grieve in whatever way you need to grieve in, but allowing that space to allow what comes to come, to sit with the energy of the passing, and thinking, I know for my own self too, when my mother passed, yes, it was sad, it was horrible. 5 years of her life she'd been very ill, but then there was also the relief, and I was just so happy for her that she didn't have to suffer anymore, and all of those things. But if you say that to somebody, right, like, well, I'm happy that she was finally gone, it's like taken as this horrible thing. How did you're happy that she's, no, I'm not happy that she's not here. I'm happy that she no longer is suffering, and that she doesn't have to do all the things, and so she's able to move on to the next step, right, and to for her soul to do what it needs to do here or somewhere else. But we get so caught in what's an acceptable thing to say, do, behave, feel, and it can be really messy sometimes. And so then we keep quiet, we don't say anything. And so when you were talking about this expansiveness, like once you got home and were able to, like, and into that energy, that's not something that most people would talk about, because that's not how we're supposed to feel. And who gets to tell us what we're supposed to feel? This is one of the things that irritates me. But we don't know what we're supposed to feel, because we're told what we're supposed to feel. Yeah. And so the fact that you allowed yourself that space and went, you know what, this is what I'm feeling, and it feels okay to feel this. And I think is just amazing. And I think we need to give ourselves more grace, but each other as well more grace when.
And I think too, like in our culture, we just don't we don't think about death in that way. That life is life is a preparation for death, or that we could be preparing for it. Like, there's the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which that's all part of their culture, that we acknowledge it. We're born and we're going to die. It's not like how we in America go, the minute you're born, you start dying. That's not really true, because our bodies are wired for living. So we're not mechanical. We're organisms that are seeking life all the time. And so we get to look at our belief systems around living and dying. And I know, like, I'll just share a little bit too, and if we don't have to go too much into this, but you and I have been working on death for, when did we start? Like in November, we started getting together and creating, death ceremonies for each other, right? And, shamanically, we go into the death space to do soul retrieval, for enhancing our life here, but we are still going into that death space. And you're clearing the baggage from either past life stuff, this life stuff, family patterns, ancestral patterns, that it's, I don't know, like, I don't really know what's going to happen on the other side, because I don't have a memory of that, but my soul remembers it. My soul knows that journey. And maybe there's a grace in not knowing, but there's belief systems on the planet where, that space is called the bardo. And in the bardo, it's like, the image of like Jacob Marley, when you don't heal those traumas, or you don't heal those patterns, they're like chains that weigh your soul down. And so, the Tibetans believe that, this lifetime is about freeing your soul up and also learning. So, this is, to me right now, it's being in this experience is really driving home a lot of the work that you and I have done together. And also stuff I've done on my own. It's really, it's beyond words as to how profound it feels for me.
Yeah. Well, and I thought, when we started talking today, not so much when you told me this was happening, but when we started talking today, I was like, well, of course this had to happen, right? Because of the work that we're doing. And so it's like we've been working on death and rebirth and that moving through. And so the energy of whatever, whether it's a person or a thing or something we hang on to consciously or unconsciously, we have to release it in some way. And this is what our brain knows is death, right? So we have to have something, it has to die for us to be able to move forward. And we often don't think of it, excuse me, we often don't think of it that way because death is scary and death is, a negative and the worst thing possible. But if we want to move forward and we don't want to carry with us whatever it is, mine has been ego that I've been working on, and we've talked about, in the work we've been doing, digging under, like ego, sort of like a pretty high level, but it seems to be all consuming for me right now. And so, like ego is part of it, but so digging into that, but to release it and to be rebirthed out the other side, I've had to sit hard in it and had ego like smack me to be able to, which I'm like, what is the best way to explain this? But it's like, it's been painful, like physically, emotionally, mentally painful. And some of the things that you were working on, there's, and you can speak to it or not, that's up to you, but this makes sense to me, right? That this happened. And then this expansiveness, because it allows space, because we can heal relationships, and we can heal in different ways, but there's levels, right? Sometimes it comes to the death of, and it doesn't have to be the physical death of a person, but the death of something to be able to get through it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. And I'll kind of just share like some of the stuff that came through what we were working on. And, whoever's listening, I don't, if there's 12 of you here, actually pop 14. I just saw 14 pop in there. Say hello. It's such an intimate conversation. Love to see who's here and how this is landing for you. Just take a moment to say something, to chime in, to say hello, and so we know who's here. And because I see that there's 14 of you here. But one of the things that I was working on was power and love, like that dynamic, power and love, and how it was taught to me. And through my dad and through my experience with my dad was, when we were growing up, he was very dictatorial. It was power over all the way, very patriarchal, right? I'm sure a lot of us had that experience as we were being raised. And it's really interesting to being with my family. I have a brother and a sister, and each one of them received that very differently than I did. I'm a very multi-sensory, empathic soul. And I was very sensitive as a child, very energetically sensitive. I could feel everything. It was really interesting to get the reflection from my brother and sister that they knew this about me. They knew that I was the perfect person to be by my dad's side as he was passing. Neither one of them could do it. And they were cool with it. I was cool with it, It was just like, that's your thing. That's what you do. So it was cool to hear that, first of all, from them. The second thing about this is, like, weeks before my dad died, probably like a month or so before, I was at my altar and I was doing some ceremony. And we were working on some practice, and I don't remember what it was, but I was doing some automatic writing. And what I discovered was how much love I had for my dad, despite all of what he had ever done, that it was unconditional. I didn't love him or hate him based on his actions. I just loved him. I love him because he's him. And I thought, like, I started to cry at that moment, because I thought, like, wow, like, that's what one of the things that my relationship with my dad taught me in this lifetime, that, you know, we can be like awful to each other, but there's still this loyalty and this love. That was the other thing about my dad, is I always knew he had my back. I always knew that. I always knew that I could go to him. And I love that I came to that realization before he passed, not like as a result of his passing, because I actually got to say that to him.
Mhm.
And he was totally floored that I said that I had that experience of him.
Mhm.
You know, and that was huge, and that was healing. And so I think when we can go into death, whether it's our own or someone that we love, with a certain sort of a certain sort of awareness that there's a healing that's happening in there too.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the most recent physical person dying that I've had, a couple of years ago when my good friend died. And I have to say there was a lot around that. And you and I have talked about this a number of times
Mm,
because of the um, relationship that we had, because of the journey that I needed to take, because of the responsibility I guess I needed to take in all of that. And that's where my spirituality came back to me, because I had pushed it away for a number of years because I didn't think of it as, you know, cricket looking after it for me. I just was angry at a number of things that had happened and had gotten sort of, I don't want to say that I didn't believe. I totally believed. I just couldn't be fully immersed. It just became too much, right?
mhm,
And so I didn't recognize that I had handed that off to her until after she passed. And she, you know, and then a year to the day her daughter passed. And at that point is when she said to me, like, I can't hang on to this anymore. You need to take it back. And she'd been like, for the whole year after she passed, she'd like, you know, you have to start doing these things again. You have to start incorporating these things again. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then after that, she's like, I cannot carry this for you anymore. You have to do this. I have Tawny to look after, right? Because her daughter
mhm,
had died. And it was at that point that it was like, oh, I didn't realize what you had been doing for me, right? What
mm.
piece you had been playing in that. And then of course it wasn't well, like riding a bike. I don't know. But, you know, I had never strayed that far from it. I just was not practicing, right? I was
Mhm,
just sort of keeping it on the back burner, on simmer.
mhm,
And but when you have that release with, because you don't understand sometimes the ties that you have with people, right?
mhm,
And the energy connections. And one of the things that you had mentioned when we were talking about this just that couple of minutes before we started was about the void of energy, right? And how
mhm,
once a person passes, their energy leaves. Well, as a collective, we need to fill in that space again. And so it's
mhm,
like, what are we filling that in with? And so
mhm.
everything has to shift, whether
Right.
we recognize it or not, it's all shifting. And that's huge. That's huge to think about that.
Yeah, it really is, because, you know, the way I picture that too, and I picture our belief systems like this too, the archetypal patterns that we play through on this planet, as like patterns, like layers of patterns that are available for our soul and our ego, right? And so when we don't have the awareness, our ego plays through that, right? And when we start to wake up and we start to take our power back, we're really consciously connecting with ourselves as spirit, which we call soul, right? Embodied in this little tight human experience that we have. And then that's where I think we become conscious as creators, because now we have all of these patterns that we start to become aware of if we're doing that work, and we're starting to understand how this is, that it doesn't have to be heavy, it doesn't have to be bad, it doesn't have to be painful, it doesn't have to be traumatic, that we don't have to hang on to our trauma as a story to tell, or something to continually work on, because we get trapped in that too, and I've been there many, many years, right? If this little thing, like when we're expanding, and I know you know this too, when we're expanding, we bump up against those patterns that are just always there. And so they're constant reminders of, like, you can rest right here and let the pattern take over and do the work, or you can make that stand for yourself. And I'm going to use the word push through the pattern, but I don't really mean like push through the pattern. It's really, you're just making that stand for yourself, and you're being, I'm just kind of doing it with my body, but you're just saying no to anything other than what you're choosing to create as a soul. So you are by your way of being, you're rewriting or rewiring the collective pattern. So you're shifting it. That's how we're shifting consciousness. We're not just doing it as an individual, right? That's ego that thinks that, right? We're doing it as a collective. We're consciously co-creating as spirit. So I like to think of it like the entire ocean, right? We're the entire ocean, and we're also that drop of water that has a thought of consciousness, that we can consciously choose to do this. And when we're aligned with ourself as spirit, and we're operating through that, that's where we can really stand in that power, because it's not dominant power, right? It's not that kind where we're powering over, I'm right, I'm more spiritual, I'm more elevated because I've had better experiences than you, right? It's not that. That's ego again. It's like ego
laughing because
wrapped
I
in
remember having a
spirituality.
conversation with my mother. Right? Like, I was more enlightened. No, she was more enlightened. It was many years ago, 30 probably, but yes.
Yeah, it's funny, we can still fall into that trap, and it's just the dynamic of being human. And it's okay that we do that, right? It's like that. We don't want to transcend being human, because we came here to have this experience. We also came here to learn and to remember who we are. And we came at this specific time, all of us that are participating in this right now. If you can hear my voice, you chose it to be here at this time for a reason. And it's just our job, each individual, to find out what that is and to live it out.
Yeah. That's exactly it. It's right. We're all having the individual experience, but it's the collective energy that creates, and we create with. It's like this over under kind of thing. It all is. And so, that, so true. So true. One of the other things that you had brought up too, and of course our conversation takes a different direction, and so I'm like trying to like go backwards, like where did this come in? But one of the things you had mentioned was death portals. And I absolutely believe this, that we have different times where we're given the opportunity to and I've had this conversation, I don't know if it's with you, but I have had this conversation before, and we're not always conscious in this space, conscious of that decision, but we do have a decision, and there's different times that can happen. And the interesting thing, when you were telling that story, again, this goes back to my friend Cricket, is because I was really angry with her, because she had told me, she had made arrangements. She knew, she was a shamanic practitioner as well. She had talked to the people that she needed to talk to, promised me she would be here till a certain time. And then she wasn't, right? Went like 20 years earlier. And one of the things that she did say afterwards, after she had passed, was that given the choice with where she would be and where she was, it just made more sense. And it was like, okay, I can understand that more, right? But I was so angry in the moment, because it's like, you promised me you would be here. You weren't. And so, just, and I don't want to say allowing grace for it, but knowing that we do have those, I'm not even outs. I don't want to say that they're outs, But we're always our soul, our spirit, it's always making decisions. It's always moving in a certain way that we may not be conscious of. And the more we can tap into that, right, which is where I think, intuition, higher power, the divine, whatever you want to call it, the more we can tap into that, the more we can recognize our part, right? The part we play in it. We're not just puppets here. We are. And so we have that responsibility. No, that's not it. We have that choice of how we move in the world. And often we get so caught up in the exterior part of it that we disconnect from the inner part, and we don't recognize how much power we actually have. Yeah.
There's just so much about that, because as you're talking too, I'm thinking about like the different belief systems that I was exposed to, that I'm sure a lot of us have been exposed to. There's a rampant patriarchy that runs through our religious network, whether you call yourself a Christian or you're Catholic or whatever. There's we live in a world that patriarchy rules, so it's hard to not have it in all places, because it's in every one of us. It's part of our programming. It's a pattern. And so what I found really interesting too is like being in presence with others who have that dominant sort of religious patriarchal model, that first of all, there's spirit everywhere. So spirit moves and works in everything. And so there's no pattern anywhere that is more powerful than spirit. And that's one thing that I kind of got driven home to me in this experience. And then the other part is how easy it is to get lulled into someone else's way of being when they really, really are, I don't want to say they really, really believe it, but they're really strong in what they believe, right? That they don't allow anything else in there. And it's almost like a guarded defense system around their belief system. And to me, it's really interesting, because throughout my life, I always, I think that's where I got into trouble, is because the more powerful the voice, the more right that voice was. And then whatever I was thinking, or even in whatever I was experiencing, because most of what I believe is through what I experience. And even then I try to not believe it, because I like to be open. I like to be like, I don't like to have like, well, I believe it's this way because I experienced it. It's like, I want to keep having those experiences because I'm really curious about it, because I really don't know. And so all I can really do is put together pieces from my experiences, but I don't, but what's interesting is like the crazy making that would happen in my mind when someone else had a very dominant belief system that wasn't in alignment with my own, and how the energy of that can kind of, it makes you question and doubt. And, did I really experience this? And like, did I really like, like, do I really experience life in this way? And it's really interesting. But then, I allow for myself to get curious in those moments too, of what is it about this person and what they're presenting to me. And is it possible? Sure. In their mind, it is possible. That's how they're living it. That's how they're experiencing it. Do I want to experience it that way? No, because it doesn't set me free. So am I wrong because I want to be free? I don't know. I guess it depends on who you ask, right? And to me, empowerment is about our ability to be in our own power, and also set ourselves and others free, without dominating over. And so I think that is just where I get to make my stand. That it's not about religion. It's not about what you believe. It's really about like, how does my soul want to operate on this plane in the best and highest, where I get, as a soul, the evolution that I'm here to do, to do the job that I'm here to do. right? And I can make it that simple.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, I mean, we could go down a whole rabbit hole of, religion
I feel like we
and
are in a rabbit hole right now.
yeah, but do we ever pick just one? No, they're tunnels everywhere.
Everywhere.
But if I think about, I often look at it, and maybe this is right or wrong, it's my idea, but there's levels, right? And so as you come back time and again, because I believe that our soul does that, and we come back time and again, and you're working and you're learning and you're doing these different things. And there's some people that are here that are just part of your experience. Whatever's happening doesn't matter. Might matter to them, but they're just part of your experience. And there's other people that are at levels to remind you that there's levels. So they, it's like, okay, this reminds me of the work that I've done over the years, centuries, eons, lifetimes, because that's not how I want to think. That's not how I think. That's not where I want to be. And, so is it a hierarchy? I don't think of it that way, but like wisdom, I think, more than a hierarchy, right? That a wisdom that comes with multiple lifetimes, multiple reincarnations, multiple growth stages that our soul goes through. Mm-hmm. Because our soul is all knowing, but we never stay in that place. We come because the experience is what it's about, right? The experience to learn and grow and expand allows soul, even though all knowing, to learn, grow, and expand. So even if you may know all the things, right? Let's say you're in a math class and you have 100%, you can still learn new things, new ways of doing it, new thought processes to get there. Just because you can get 100% on a test doesn't mean that you have everything you need, just because you have the core knowledge of it. Does that make sense? Like when
it makes perfect sense. And what what I hear that you're saying is you're talking about really the differences between a linear earthly experience and a multidimensional soul experience. Mm-hmm. And how our soul, if you think about it, like it's always evolving. There's nothing static about the universe, right? Everything that we experience in life is movement, it's expansion, it's always growing, right? But what do we do as little human beings is we like the finite. We like to hold on to it. We like to define it. We like to put it in a box. I like to know what that is. I like to be very sure that when I wake up in the morning, it is going to be this way, right? It's very limited. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's funny because like when I said that, it made me think of Joe Dispenza and how he goes, if anyone's ever listened to Joe Dispenza, he says this litany of things that we do in the morning, right? Like you wake up, you check your email, you go to the bathroom, blah, 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 right? And it's like the same thing day in and day out. So mm-hmm. that there's a limitation inherent in that, because you're not opening yourself up to what's possible today, what may happen today, mm-hmm. right? And then when something does kind of come down the pike that you didn't expect, then you're kind of blown off course because you're out of your routine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's talking about like if we want to bring something different, to create a different experience in our lives, that we can do that, but we have to shift our routines. We have to get out of that static, limited mindset. And that's what I heard in what you shared, is that like getting, going for the grade and the 100%, and now it's finite and I don't need to learn anymore. Soul is like always evolving. There's also, you talked about hierarchy. There's a great word that came from, I was reading The Physics of Angels by Rupert Sheldrake and Matthew Fox. They use this word called holarchy, which I love because there is a hierarchy in the structure of the universe, but it's not like how we think of hierarchy, where one thing's more important than another, right? We have it mm-hmm. set up like a pyramid, right? Where there's the most important things at the top and mm-hmm. everything, gets wider and deeper from there. But holarchy is, there's a holism to it. There's an equality and a unity to it. And it's just vibrational differences, So like, it's when you think about the vibrational difference of like matter versus just pure energy, right? It's not one is better than the other, but we might say that because we're human and we love matter.
And we also love hierarchy. It's a thing we do.
Yeah. Which kind of goes back to like, I'm better than you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that whole, the whole model of competition too, that plays into the patriarchal model that we are currently living in right now, that I think that we are actually evolving out of. The more we individually wake up and experience life differently, we are going to create it differently. It just has to happen that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think just on that point too, like it's shifting because we're shifting, and so it has to shift, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but we're also going to come up against a lot of resistance from those who are not shifting, right? Because it will shift because there's so many shifting, but there's still people who are not shifting that are going to put up resistance that causes that pushback that we see as a negative, or the clashing, the polarities that we're seeing and things like that, is because of the changes that are happening. And as things are changing, it will lessen, but it's going to intensify first, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's the way energy works. Energy needs that, because if it's just going to like basically float away if we don't put up some resistance. So there's this resistance that we push against to keep things going in a way, in a path, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I see is happening with this awakening. And so there has to be that resistance to keep it on path. Otherwise, it's like, whatever, right? It just kind of dissipates. Yeah. And so yeah, eventually it will shift and be going more in that direction. Yeah. But it has to happen.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up resistance. So like before all of this happened, I was actually doing a 3-part class that was going to start on May 4th, May 5th, which was at the new moon and the full moon lunar eclipse. Mm-hmm. And I had 3 classes set up. We were going to work with the moon, and we are going to work with resistance and persistence. And so I did like a free workshop, and I had to cancel all that. So that's going to be happening. I'm going to be redoing that class and promoting it again. So you guys will see some of that, whoever's watching this, come through, that the class is going to start in June. We're going to do the June moon cycle. But my contention is that the energy that we use, that we employ to resist, to push away, to keep ourselves down, to however we're using resistance. And for artists, that is a big topic, right? We're always like sitting down and facing when we're doing something new and we're excited about it. We go to sit and do it. And then, avoidance, resistance, and fight with it, whatever, right? But we have also this energy that I will call persistence, which is the same kind of, it's just it's how you're using resistance. And that's what I heard in your share, is that there's resistance that we use to harm ourselves, to harm another, to like gum up the works or whatever. But it's almost like persistence. It's like the energy to persist and pursue what you're here to do, where you're resisting everything else because you're persisting in what you're here to do, what you're focusing on. And so it takes oomph to do that, right? And yes, resistance is part of that process, because part of our growth process. And when you look at nature and you picture that little seed pushing up out of the soil is resistant, to that. So that little seed has to to be strong has to break through stuff. And then you think about like chickens and the eggs and moths that are coming out of cocoons and butterflies that are coming out of cocoons, and the level of resistance that we experience because we experience gravity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I love that you brought that in.
Yeah, well, and just as you were talking about that too, where we do see resistance in so many things because it is needed, right? It is needed because and it's not that things can't be simple. It's not that, because ultimately they are simple, but the resistance is there more for direction than for to stop something, right? Or to make it hard. It's for direction. And that's how I see it. And just when you were, talking about even the tree, sorry, from a seed, like even just the shell and then the dirt and then the environment and then the fires and then, and it still persists. It still persists.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. John says spiraling upwards. Yes, thank you. I was trying to say there. But yes, that's it. It's necessary. It's necessary.
And then I just kind of ask us all to like look at our lives and all of the things that we've experienced in our lives that may be traumatic, that may have been really hard, but you're still here. Mm-hmm. You survived. And I think that's a huge thing that we don't give ourselves acknowledgement about. That mm-hmm. it's like so huge, and you get to celebrate the hard things that you move through, and it's versus the victim-y part of ourselves, right? Which that's our ego, right? That likes the pity, or the reason why I can't do a thing is because of this hard thing that I experienced in my life. And it's yes, you've experienced that hard thing in your life, but then you've also survived it, which shows me that you're very strong. It doesn't mm-hmm. matter how pretty it was or not, or how pretty it wasn't. You still are here. You're still breathing the air. And so that to me speaks to a resilience that maybe is untapped yet, because that ego story is just a little too strong.
Mm-hmm. And we often don't look at it that way, but the things that have happened to us make us who we are, right? Mm-hmm. And I have this conversation often because, would I choose to relive my life in the same way that I had to move through it? Probably not. Would I choose that someone else would have to do that? Probably not, right? But it absolutely has made me who I am. It's made me passionate about the things I'm passionate about. It's made me put energy into things that I want to put energy into, and it would have been completely different if I'd lived a different life. So mm-hmm. all of that makes me who I am. Would I be here talking to you today about spirit and all of this and doing the healing work I'm doing if I hadn't lived through that? And I can probably 98% sure I wouldn't be, right? Mm-hmm. Because I wouldn't have had any reference. And so if this is my path, I needed to take that journey to be able to mm-hmm. do this work. And I do feel like this is my purpose. This is the work that I need to do. So if I had not lived that path, I would not be here to be doing this work. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't give enough, I don't want to say credit, but yeah, maybe it is credit, but we don't look at things in that way. We mm-hmm. just look at, oh yeah, that was really shitty, or, oh, it was life, or however we look at it. But it ultimately makes us who we are to do what we do. Mm-hmm. What I can think is sad, and I did this for many, many years, and I recognize people who are doing it, is when you have a path and you start on that path and then you allow yourself to veer from that path. And that might be part of your journey, but it's hard to look back now, at how much longer it took me because of the different things. But that still is part of my journey. Maybe that's exactly where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be there. And, same for the other people who are taking that journey. Just keep moving towards it, because you never know when you're actually supposed to be there. As hard as it can be to watch it in your own self or someone else.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain kind of grace in the understanding that there is a map, there is a grand design, but then within that we have the free will to choose the path. And it's not like, I don't believe anyway that, if you do it wrong, you're going to hell and that's it. You're, fire and damnation, right? I really think that there is a grace involved, and that, maybe we're creating karma, maybe we're creating more density within our, layers of our soul body, that we get to work on and healing the next time, or, in between, our lives or whatever. There's just so much that we just don't know. And there's a lot of books that I've read that are coming to mind right now about this topic. There's one by I think it's called Proof of Life or Proof of Death, by Eben Alexander. He is a brain, I think he was a brain surgeon. I keep saying was, but he's alive. He died, and because of what he did in his life, he had a very strong memory of like where he went when he was in the death space. And when he came back, he wrote this book and his experiences of it. And then there's like Dolores Cannon that has written several books. There's Michael Newton that has written several books. And then Brian Weiss? Is that his name? Many Lives, Many Masters. There's many others I could name that talk about, going for a past life regression or, hypnotic regression, where you can go into like that in between life stage and learn what you need to learn about stuff. So to me, there's like that it's available to us, that we get into the altered state, and that's basically what a regression is. A hypnotic regression is just it's a hypnotic state. It's an altered state, which we can recreate on our own. It's just we get to have a guide when we do that. So it's like a shamanic journey to me. But I feel like that it's all available to us. There's a gift there, and that if we're curious enough, if we just get curious, that we can learn so much about the journey of our soul, and where does it go, and what is it here to do, and all that kind of stuff. And I think if we can get in touch with that connection with spirit, that helps us move through all of this this mayhem that that we call life. Because I do know, as a coach and a guide, that people get confused, people get off track, or think they're off track, or they're unsure of themselves, or they're unsure of their choices, and that we think we're derailing ourselves, or we'll never get it done. And I just want to say that, like, wherever you are in your journey, it's perfect, because that getting it right or getting it wrong, that's of this earth. It's not. I really don't think it's that way.
And I think the more you question that you're not getting it right, or you're not, the more you actually are.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you're questioning, then you're seeking, you're looking for answers, you're on a journey. And so you're right where you need to be to keep getting answers and keep finding new information. It's when we don't question that I start to worry. It's like, this is the way it is, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
And that's and maybe those are placeholder people that we need to cause the ripple effects that we need. I don't know what their job is. I just know mine.
Yeah, I know. And that's like, I love that you're saying that too, because it's like, we're all here at this time we have something that we're all doing, but it's not all the same. We're not all here to evolve. Some of us are playing that role of not evolving because it serves the time frame that we're in, right? It serves consciousness in that way. So we can't assume that because everyone's here that they're here for spiritual growth and evolution. They may just be on vacation.
To be your fence post. They might need to be your redirection. They might for somebody else's who's on a journey. We don't know. We don't know why they're. I just try to worry about my own self and be open. I think that's the biggest thing for me as a seeker is to just constantly be open, right? To be open to what else, knowing that I don't know all the things. And the universe is just so expansive. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And all of that. And those who are locked in the absolutes, I think are missing out on some amazing things, but that might not be their journey this time.
Yeah. To me, that would be really painful. That it happens.
I can't imagine it personally.
Yeah. As an artist, I would just always be poking at it, questioning it,
Well, I
my
think
curiosity.
I think that's where a lot of art, creatives, I started with healing with creativity, and that and then have brought the spiritual in more, and it turns out it's mostly the same people, because creatives are open to a different way of doing and thinking. They don't work well in the linear. They can, but not as an only way, right? And so it's not like I had to go seeking a whole new network of people, because we're on this journey of opening up, whether it's through actual art or art, healing, spiritual. It's all combined, right? It's all connected.
I couldn't agree more with you. And I really feel like artists, because of their nature, just they're tapped into spirit in a way that not everyone is, because they have this curiosity of like how this works and why this is the way it is. And it's almost like an insatiable, wondering all the time. And we're always, I don't know if we're going for trying to satisfy it, but for me, I know I'm always seeking, for that kind of stuff, and, being in the dream space. And then for me in my life, and that's probably exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, is the hardest part for me has been to take what I vision, what I see, what I experience, and bring it into a form of some sort. It's challenging, and I feel like that's why art, because you get to kind of symbolically and metaphorically create, and it means something to me, but it might not mean what I'm intending it to mean, because we don't have the words for that, right? We don't even have like a picture of it anywhere other than what you experience in your mind. And that's where I feel like, it was awesome when abstraction started to enter into, and surrealism started to enter into the space of art. We started getting away from realism, and I always say representational art it can be anything, because, anything I do is representational of like an idea I had, so I'm pretty loose with that definition. But I feel like the job of the artist, especially now, if they're a spiritual based sort of artistry, is that we start to bring these images out, what we're having for experiences as either energy workers, body workers, healers, shamanic practitioners, whatever label that you put on your work, that you are experiencing another dimension, another realm, that I feel like that we need to somehow get that out. that we start to develop the language for it, that we start to, I don't want to say normalize it, but we start to bring it in to the conversation in a way where we're not afraid of it, you know,
Mm.
or we're not like afraid to do it because someone might think I'm weird, you know.
I've given up on that. I'm weird and I'm embracing it because I don't want to be the norm. I don't, or what is expected. It doesn't work for me. I tried it for so many years and just about killed me. And so, allowing that uniqueness gives so much freedom to express in different ways. And, there are days when I think, oh, it would be lovely if I could, paint exactly what I see in my head. And if I practice it, I probably could. But, that's not how my experience comes out. I'm very abstract so I might have something concrete in my head. It doesn't come out that way.
Yeah.
But learning over time that it is one and the same, but it needs to, I need to have this idea to get this out on the canvas, right? So it's not that I need to make it look like this, but I need to have this in my mind to be able to make it look like this, that it does on the canvas. And we often get stuck in it must look like this that we see in our mind instead of allowing what needs to be on the canvas to be there. Or whatever your creative outlet is, right? The words or the garden or
you're like talking about getting beyond the literal representation of what you're seeing, and maybe the metaphorical or just the suggestion, and when you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, it's like kind of like a shorthand version of what you're seeing. It's like trying to describe a dream to somebody, right? Like how textural and vivid our dreams can be. And it's like, and they have feel, right? They have a feel. How do I get that across to somebody, right? Because it's not linear. It's so not linear. And so like our experiences when we're journeying and having these kind of like phenomenal energetic experiences, it's we don't have a language for, right? It's so hard to even represent in an image, right? But that's why I think like too, if we can embody the experience and let it come through onto the canvas however it's going to, right? Without trying to get, I think that's what the crazy making part of that is like, oh, I'm trying to get it like this because this is how I really saw it, right? And like kind of let it be more of a co-creation with the canvas, with the paint, with, whatever wind is blowing in the studio or not, that all the elements are creating with you too. There's a lot of letting go and all of that to say that, right?
And ultimately, isn't that what it's all about? Just let go. I mean, I'm not a religious person. I don't typically use the word God, but the language the phrase that I keep hearing is let go and let God, right? And let go and let spirit, let go and let divine, whatever it is just let go and let what needs to happen. And I think I spent most of my life trying to control things around me because it was so out of control, my life. But the more I can live in a space of controlled uncontrolledness, it's like you have to be grown up
paradox.
Your bills that you have to do, but just allowing the rest of it to flow as it should or could, or
I just like that. Structured chaos.
Yes. yes
chaotic structure.
But that's exactly it. Dawn had made another note here. You wouldn't be who you are right now had you made another decision. Absolutely right. You two ladies are having this great experience with each other and sharing with us. Yes, that's why we started this, is because we have these amazing conversations. And we're like, we need to be sharing these conversations. But it looks like time that we should probably wrap up for today. Any final thoughts?
If I have final thoughts, it's just going to take us down another rabbit hole. So this is a good time to just go, you know what, let's table this for the next time. Yeah, I just want to thank all of you who showed up, and, I'd love to at some point hear, like, how all of this landed. Maybe I'll never know,
leave
and that's
comments
okay.
afterwards if you want to, if you don't want to, say
Yeah.
something now, or send us an email, whatever you want to do. Because it would be, we talk about sometimes, like, how far can we push the envelope?
Yeah. We're
And
getting there, man. I'm
Mhm.
telling you.
talking death and religion today. So, it's, we pushed it a little further than we sometimes do.
Yeah. We'll never talk about politics, though.
All right. Well,
all right. Maybe we will. We'll have to have one of those conversations.
I live in Alberta, the Texas of Canada. So it comes up in my world. It does. It
Yeah,
does.
no doubt. No doubt.
But we'll leave that for today.
See, I told you, if we keep talking, we're going to have like whole nother tangent.
I know.
Yeah.
That's what happens. We end up talking for hours sometimes.
Yeah.
What's going on in your world? Anything exciting? I know you're just getting back home and settled again.
Yeah, I am settling in. I am going to be promoting again the class that I had to postpone. So that's going to start on June 2nd. It'll be 3 classes working ceremonially with the energies of the moon. We're going to start on the full moon. It's actually on the 4th, but we're going to get as close as we can by working on the 2nd, and then we'll work in the half moon, and then we'll finish on the new moon, which will be on the 16th. So it's the 2nd, the 9th, and the 16th. And if you're on my mailing list, you'll get a little opportunity to sign up for that. I might even rerun the webinar that I did announcing that too, so you can get an understanding and a flavor of what we're going to be working in resistance and persistence and creating from. Since the moon energy in June is about desire, it kind of plays in perfectly to kind of tap into your desires, expose them, and then really tap into that persistence that it takes to bring your desire into form.
I love that. As Sandra says, what I got from this: keeping an open mind while having self-belief, balancing this. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes. Yeah. I love when we get comments. It's, I often don't pay attention to who's on here at this time. I kind of look afterward to see how many people have watched. And it's been great to see the numbers, go up on the release. So leave a comment after, like, if you're listening and it's not live, or you just need time to ponder and think about it, leave a comment and let us know what you thought, or just put in your 2 cents. Doesn't have to always be about us.
Yeah.
we'll share.
Make the comment. I mean, make the world broader by adding your comment.
Yes, it doesn't have to. What do we have going on? We have Transcendence coming up in June. So that's Art and Spirituality Summit. So excited for that. And I don't know. I feel like we should have something before that, but I don't know what it is.
That's a big one, though.
It is a big one. It's one of my favorites. So maybe even my favorite, but yeah. So that's coming up. Well, thank you, Deborah, and thank you everyone who has been here. And I love our conversations. So
yeah, me too. And I'm glad we get to share it in this format. So I'm so grateful to all of you who show up for this conversation with Spirit.
Absolutely.